Have you experienced the awesome power of the Panasonic Real 3DO system? Obviously.
Presenting 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe. It's time to put away your toys.
3DO from Panasonic, Gold Star, and Creative Labs. A new low price and free games.
Mind-blowing graphics of Panasonic Real 3DO.
3DO.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 3DO Experience, the 3DO retrospective podcast where we talk about the 3DO console, the company behind it, and everything in between. I'm Bill, and this is my co-host, Threk. How you doing, Threk?
Ooh, I'm a spooky ghost. We're doing the Halloween episode, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then yeah, I'm a spooky ghost invading your eardrums, listeners. Ooh.
So, for those who don't know, we actually ran a poll on our Twitter account because it is officially Spooky Month, the wonderful month of October. And we kind of put it up to our fans to see what games we would cover this month, and we put it up to a vote, and our choices were Alone in the Dark, D, Virtuoso, and Killing Time. And no one likes Killing Time, as we learned. And people really wanted us to play D, so for this episode we're going to be talking about D. But before we get to D, how you been, Thrak, otherwise?
I'm actually doing pretty well. I had the last week off from my normal job, so I got to relax a little bit and just kind of chill out, which has been a great benefit. And it's getting colder out, which comes with a little bit of a mental health boost for me because I tend to prefer the colder months. So I'm doing good, and also thank you to everybody who voted in the poll. I appreciate it. So, but how are you doing, Bill?
I'm doing pretty good. I had the day off, celebrate Leif Erikson Day, you know.
Jurga Hagadurgan.
I really didn't do much today. Me and Alex, my sister and co-host of my other show, we were watching some anime movies for a future project, so that was what we did today. Other than that, I went home and I straight up passed out on the couch for 4 hours and woke up, and typical Monday.
Were they spooky anime movies?
Not really. They were they're actually all based off of a series.
Gotcha.
We do have a Halloween episode planned, but I'm going to keep that under wraps for now.
Gotcha. Speaking of anime, a friend of mine informed me that the notable website The Right Stuff is doing like a fire sale or something. Like I guess they're merging with Crunchyroll, or Crunchyroll bought them out.
So they got bought out by Sony, who owns Crunchyroll, and they're basically just merging their store into the Crunchyroll store.
Yeah, but they're doing like a big clearance sale, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys want to buy anything, like any manga or whatever they have, probably now would be a good time to do it, I assume.
Yeah, no, it's probably now because a bunch of manga prices are about to get jacked up pretty soon anyways, so.
Yeah, there's one I might actually buy a manga, everybody. Oh my god. It's one I've been curious to for a while. So you know Junji Ito, right?
Mm-hmm.
That one about his cats, the Yoon and Moo, Junji Ito's Cat Diary. Because it's like it's not really horror. It's just like, from what I'm told, it's just kind of like funny, and I'm kind of curious to it. And I mean, they don't have it like on a super discount. They have it in stock, but it is cheaper than everywhere else I've seen it. So I'm probably gonna grab it because I would like to read it.
He had some pretty good work. Like he's a very fascinating writer.
Oh yeah. Our friends of the show, A Novel Console, they're doing their Itovania month, where each episode they read like an Ito, like I guess collection, and then Chris plays a Metroidvania game. So hearing them talk about Ito makes me go, oh yeah, he has that cat one I want to read. So yeah, I'm gonna try to read it. So hi Chris. Hi, I hope you're listening. You better respond to this if you're listening.
I'm sure we'll hear about it in the novel console server. They all seem
hope-
to talk about our episodes every week over there.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And hopefully, me and Chris are finishing Resident Evil 5 this week, so we'll probably
Nice.
talk about that in the future as well.
I also want to give a shout out to Chris from Retro Hangover and Jala for shouting out our poll on their servers, respectively. That
Yeah.
definitely helped get us a boost, which was much appreciated.
Hi, Jala. I hope you're doing well. We're gonna do Shining Force 3. I swear.
Yeah, well, that was very nice of them, though.
Oh yeah, everyone's so nice most of the time.
we'll see after talking about the game they wanted us to play.
I'm not.
So, getting into that though, D, this game has a lot of history behind it.
Yeah, I can see why.
Yeah, this game is. I hate using this term sometimes, but this game is actually probably one of the most proper games for the description of a product of its time.
Yeah, very much. It's an originator, I think.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, so I guess before we get into the game, we should probably talk about Kenji Eno a little bit.
Okay.
Kenji Eno. So for those who don't know, D was developed by a company known as WARP, who I just found out today is still around, which to me is baffling. But
Aren't they a record label? Warp Records. They're known for housing Flying Lotus's albums.
I'm not sure if those are the same company or not, but that would be something if they were.
Well, hey, I gotta throw some. Yeah, they're the Warp I'm talking about is a British record label that was formed in the late '80s that typically does like Aphex Twin and Flying Lotus, some like electronic guys. Brian Eno, not Kenji Eno, but Brian Eno. You know, who's a personal hero of mine. So in a weird way, it's related.
That's actually kind of interesting.
That is
spooky. Talking about Warp, though, they were founded in 1994, and I thought they shut down around 2000 after the release of D2. But apparently they're still around. Like they're now known as From Yellow to Orange, and they were briefly known as Super Warp at one point.
Okay. Well, have they done anything notable since?
No, they released a Wii game called You, Me, and the Cubes in 2009.
Baby, it's just you, me, and the cubes.
Yeah, and Kenji Eno tragically passed away in 2013.
Well, this game is his legacy. Oh boy.
Yeah, and it's honestly, in my opinion, not even his most interesting game, but we'll get to that, I guess, in the later section.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kenji Eno is a very fascinating individual in gaming. He's mostly known as a composer, believe it or not.
That is surprising. Given the lack of quality audio in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was a composer on Sega Rally 2 of all things, which I find really amusing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
I don't think he was the only composer in that game, but he did do some of the sound work.
So he worked for Sega?
Not directly, but he had a very close partnership with Sega. We'll get into it more towards the later half of this episode where we talk about the other stuff that Warp did. But he had a very close relationship with Sega throughout his career.
Gotcha. Interesting.
But before that, so full disclosure, I don't own the 3DO version of this game. I played on the Saturn because the 3DO version of this game is kind of expensive.
Yeah, I do not own this game either.
I will say though, the 3DO cover art for this game is really pretty cool. It's the only version of the game that uses this particular cover. It's got like kind of just a 90s look to it that I kind of enjoy.
Yeah, it looks interesting and kind of inviting from like a horror perspective that there's something interesting here, you know? Because Yeah, horror covers they can either be really bad. I think most horror covers are really bad, but I think this one looks actually like rather interesting. So
No, it's definitely like an eye catching cover. Like you take one look at that and it draws you into something that you'd like to try out.
it's funny you say that because the front cover is eyes.
Yeah, I know. At
The,
least for the 3DO version,
yeah, the eyes of what's her name again? She has a name.
so the main character to this game is actually kind of interesting. You play as a girl named Laura Harris, and what's interesting about her is she was actually designed to be like a digital actress who Kenji Eno actually wanted to appear in multiple games as like an actress, but not as the same character, because this character does appear in both of these sequels, but it's not the same Laura. It's like a different character each time, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, that's very ahead of its time because with the rise of like AI and higher quality computer generated graphics, as we've seen in say like the Star Wars movies bringing back dead actors, it doesn't surprise me to see even back in the 90s them trying to do this. I mean, at least with this Laura thing, it's not based on a real person. You know, they're just trying to create a digital actor, which is very ahead of its time. But that's kind of the problem with being ahead of your time. You know, this game is the prime example of when your ideas don't really match with the technology that you have.
Yes, because this game is almost 100% FMV, like CGI computer generated footage. And I won't say it looks great today.
You don't say.
Some of the backgrounds, I guess, look okay, but the Laura is not a pleasant looking model anymore. None of the humans in this game look good, I will say.
Have you ever seen the movie Lawnmower Man?
I have not.
Okay, so if any of our audiences watched Lawnmower Man, like there's those weird CG like cutscenes where they're in like the weird dimension, whatever, right? Like she looks like she's from that movie. And keep in mind that movie was in 1993, and this game came out in 1994 or 95, I think. So they're probably using similar technology. And I can't imagine what people thought of this game back then. I genuinely can't. But I feel like it had to look ugly at the time.
True.
You know?
Although most CGI at this time looked pretty ugly because I guess to give the release date, this game originally released in 1995. So, hey, the year I was born. How about that?
How about that? Yes. I was a mere baby.
Let's see. This came out in... It doesn't say when it came out exactly in America. It just says April 95.
Okay.
So I was a very young child.
Young baby. Young. Oh yeah. In your diapers.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess giving a brief plot summary of this game. This game's plot
summary.
This game's plot is bizarre.
What the fuck is this game's plot, dude?
So basically, to quickly sum it up, you play as Laura Harris as she goes to investigate a hospital after learning her father went on a mass murdering spree.
Yeah, like it's so weird. Like the LA police, I think, call her to tell her this, and yet when she gets to the hospital, there's no like police tape or anything. Nope. It's freely. She just walks the fuck in,
and then the castle, the hospital mysteriously morphs into a castle because it's Castlevania, apparently.
I would love if this game was Castlevania.
And then the funniest part of this game is your father appears like as a floating disembodied head multiple times throughout the game, and he just like taunts you.
Laura, you can't stop me, Laura.
And that's basically the plot. You're basically, this game, to describe it, is pretty much, it's like Myst, only if it was a horror game, unless it didn't age nearly as well.
Well, and less puzzle focused. Because what makes Myst interesting is that it is full of all these very weird, like, logic puzzles, but like missed logic puzzles, if that makes any sense, where it's a game that requires you to have like, unless you look it up on a guide, to like have like a notebook out and taking notes of everything so you can find how like shit connects, right? That's how it engages you because it drops you in the world and there's really no threat. There's nothing in Myst that's going to like kill you basically. You're just kind of figuring out this island basically and how it works. Whereas in D, it's very minimal. There's not really any threat. Like not really. I mean,
You
there's
get
like
knocked down a pit once.
yeah, by like a suit of armor, and then you like Scooby Doo trip him into the same pit.
Yeah.
And he just
See, this is a bit of an obscure reference, but that suit of armor, like suits of armor in video games, like immediately like set off my alarms because I don't know if you've ever played a Clock Tower Ghost Head by any chance.
no.
So that's like it's known as Clock Tower 2 over here in the US, but that game has an infamous like part at the beginning where there's a suit of armor, and if you don't check it, that suit of armor will appear later in the game, fall on you, and kill you, and just like brick your game essentially.
Okay, because to me, it just reminded me of the suits of armor in Resident Evil 4 when you're in the castle. But
Yeah,
those are actually, interesting.
yeah. I'm always sketched by suits of armor. I don't trust them in any video game anymore.
Oh, for sure. Not even in real life.
Yeah. In terms of puzzles in this game, they're very basic. Like you turn a lot of valves.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing about this game is you have a 2-hour time limit.
Which I find interesting that they would throw that in there. I feel like it's because they realized there wasn't a lot of like a challenge or a threat. Because the puzzles are very simple. Exploration is limited at best, and you can beat this game in a very short period of time, like an hour.
You can
and a half
beat the
or
game.
Something.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can beat the game in under half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. But the game is so slow.
That's the other thing I wanted to talk about. The FMVs in this game lumber on so slowly. Like
one thing I'll give this game credit for on the 3DO is that for essentially a point and click adventure, which is probably the most generous use of that term I've ever used, which is saying a lot. They tried to optimize it for the controller. So instead of having like a cursor that you just like click on to move or whatever, like you can just hit left on the D-pad and you'll slowly turn to the left. But you do turn to the left, and there's like a button to access your very rudimentary inventory. That one time where you fight the suit of armor, it's essentially a quick time event, but it's very lenient. There's really, I feel like the time limit was only put in just to give you some form of challenge because they probably play tested it, hopefully, and were like, yeah, this is like nothing. Like this is super easy, which like for a horror game, you kind of need, like, the horror in a horror game comes from like the limitations that the game puts on you, why the early Resident Evil games work so well despite being very old is that the tank controls were a conscious design choice where it's like we're limiting the player's control to really heighten up the suspense and the horror aspects of it,
Or even in like Silent Hill where the fog is like the fog and the limited combat are your handicaps.
Yeah, and the fog was only there just to hide the shitty draw distance, but it became part of the aesthetic of the series, right? Like the good horror games find ways of limiting you, or say like the Fatal Frame games, where the only way you can confront enemies is by taking pictures of them and getting right up into their face, which is a really good use of horror imagery. And this doesn't really have any of that. Like its horror imagery is just teeny little bits here and there.
Goofy zombie pops up and you're like, oh hi, how you doing?
Yeah, they'll try like to subliminal message like a D on the screen. Which that's the thing. I don't even know why this game is called D. Like,
yeah, I don't get it either. I've never understood.
I guess a spoiler alert. At the very end of the game, when you find your dad, He basically tells you that, oh, we are part of Dracula's bloodline,
Because of
and he's
course,
like,
vampires.
yeah, and he's slowly turning into a cannibal vampire, which somehow explains why he murdered all those people, which doesn't make any sense to me because he's not like sucking up their blood or anything like that. They're literally laying in like what I called ketchup piles on the floor when you enter in the hospital. So it's not like he's harvesting them for their blood, which would make sense. Um, but he's like, oh, that's because I'm turning into the vampire. That's what's causing me to do this. And like, you need to stop me or whatever. And depending on if you grab the gun or not, you can like shoot him and kill him basically. But he does throw in, this game tries to have a twist in the story, which I commend them for trying it. But the execution is very bad because when you play the game, you can kind of see it coming, like pretty obviously, really. But again, it feels that to me that the technology was really limiting their attempts at storytelling. Because I imagine Kenji Ito probably had this like written down, right? Like a script or like a design concept for the game, and it probably read really well. But when you implement it into a game, it just doesn't have the same effect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, because I guarantee you most people aren't going to play this game, hunt it down. So I guess
No.
spoiler warning here, but apparently there's a whole subplot where it's like Laura killed her mother, and like the only reason she doesn't remember is because her dad erased the memories. Like,
yes.
okay,
And, yeah,
sure.
because during the game you get those like weird flashbacks, right? And you're seeing like weird distorted views of like your mother being like stabbed to death, basically, right? And the game,
Stabbed and then eaten.
yeah, and the game
Lovely.
the game's trying to hide it as to like, oh, who really did it? But when you're watching it, you can just kind of tell, like, oh, it was probably Laura, but they're trying to frame it as like, oh, her dad did it or something. But it's like but the game doesn't explore Laura and her dad's relationship at all. So why would that even really matter that much, right? But yeah, at the end of the game, he tries to be like, no, it was you, but I erased the memories because I guess vampires can just do that. I guess
Magic.
like has Dracula erased people's memories before? I can't remember. Oh, he erased mine. Oh, it all comes back around. But yeah, it comes back to like he had the design or the story concept. But if you think about it, this feels like a story concept and not really a story. Like he has the beats that he wants to tell, but all the parts in the middle, like connecting the main plot points, feel very sparse, if kind of all there, you know?
I feel like
honestly, if you gave me like a couple hours, I could probably write a short story with this same like plot, like little arc, and come up with something half decent, you know?
yeah.
But that requires exploring the characters, getting into the emotions of it. Maybe Laura has like a strained relationship with her father, blah, 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 right? Like you could go into that. You really could. But again, this game being limited by its technology or what it's trying to accomplish, like there's no text story in this at all. There's no like lore that you find throughout the castle detailing anything. Like there's no extra characters explaining things to you. There's nothing.
Yeah,
like there's nothing here.
Like, I think the description of bare bones Myst is perfect because unlike Myst, which has a ton of world building and like,
oh god, yes,
fascinating shit that you can learn, this game legit has like nothing. Like, this game literally was designed to be a technical showcase of Kenji Eno's ideas, and I feel like at the time it was probably cool, but modern days this game has like nothing to offer that is really neat, that you really need to see.
I mean, it could be me. Like, I was only a baby when this game came out, but I get the sense that in 1995, there were more technologically impressive games coming out than this. There had to be.
I'm trying to think horror-wise, because I mean, like, was Resi out at this point, or
Resident Evil? I think Resident Evil was a year out. I think it was being developed at this time. But
Yeah,
if I remember correctly, the original Resident Evil was 1996.
yeah, that's what it was. Yes. So Resi
Yeah,
wasn't even out yet. Silent Hill definitely wasn't out.
yeah,
We had
but
Alone in the Dark, but Alone in the Dark is even more primitive than this. Well, they're not even comparable games, to be honest.
well, because Alone in the Dark is a game at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and say like the original Resident Evil has a lot of that Alone in the Dark, like the way the game is set up is very similar to Alone in the Dark, but Resident Evil
Yes.
has just a much better execution. And the original Resident Evil hasn't aged all that well. You know, like the remake, surprisingly from 2002, has aged surprisingly well.
Yeah.
But like the setup is very similar. And it's just crazy to think that that was the game that sort of defined what video game horror should be. So in a way, D feels like it's not necessarily playing catch up or anything. It was at a time where people weren't really sure how to convey horror in video games. I mean, you had Clock Tower,
Yes.
and you probably had some other examples as well that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But
I
with
mean,
this
even
new,
Clock Tower 2 or just Clock Tower for the PS1 over here has aged better than this game has.
yeah, and but even with those existing like horror in video games hadn't really been set yet. You know what I
Yes.
mean? So, and horror is a hard thing to get right in general. I have found, you know, as I like to say, for every good horror movie, there's like 100 bad ones at least. And
Yeah.
with video games, I mean, it's not video game horror has gotten a lot better these days because the technology has gotten better, but it all kind of stemmed from Resident Evil figuring out how to video gamify horror and sort of getting that feeling. And
Resi essentially took everything Alone in the Dark did and just made it better.
yeah, yeah. And is there any D influence in that game? Probably not. But
Maybe the cutscenes, but even then, that's a stretch.
yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, say, they were working on the game, they probably heard about this and maybe gave it a look-see for any inspiration. It wouldn't surprise me if game designers just try a bunch of different games to see if anything kind of hits them. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so it's possible Shinji Mikami has played this game. Whether
I
or not it
believe
left
it.
an impact, probably not. But
So-
weirdly enough, Resident Evil had an impact on Kenji Eno with a future
Yes.
project.
It did. Before we move on to some of the post D stuff, I want to mention one fascinating story about Kenji Eno in this game.
Okay.
You know how this game has the cannibalism subplot?
Yeah.
So when this game was being developed, Kenji Eno knew that the cannibalism would have got this game basically the ESRB would have rejected it pretty hard because
Yeah.
cannibalism in a game probably would have bumped it up to AO because
Yeah.
AO was a weird rating at the time.
It was cannibalism. Is cannibalism still like allowed under the ESRB?
I don't even know anymore.
Okay.
So this is the funniest part about it is he made a version of the game that censored all the cannibalism and took it out and used that as the what he sent to the ESRB for ratings. Once the game came back and got its M rating, he switched it back with the original and just sent it out to be released.
That's really fucky. But at the time, the ESRB was very new
Yeah.
because it was 95. When did the ESRB come out? What year?
94,
93?
When did Night Trap come out? Night Trap and Mortal Kombat were pretty much the catalyst for it.
The ESRB was founded September 16th, 1994.
Okay.
So it was because the congressional hearings for those two games was in 93. I do know that.
Yes.
And then I know later when Doom came out, which I think like for home consoles in like 94, it got added to the conversation. Shockingly, right?
Yeah.
So probably like the SRB, you know, it was still trying to figure out what it was or what it was trying to be, I guess.
They also probably like gave it the rating and then just never looked at it again.
Yeah. But I get the sense nowadays that you kind of can't get away with that. And the SRB is better at checking that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But even then, the SRB can be inconsistent with the ratings it gives games. But I think that's another topic of conversation.
Yes.
But with D, when I was playing this, there was one thought I just couldn't get out of my head. And that is, this game is so fucking boring. It is,
Yeah.
for an hour and a half game, it is a slog to get through. It is miserable to play because it is, as we mentioned earlier, it is so slow. Your character moves like she had just gotten out of bed with like big ass boots on, dragging through molasses or whatever. It is just ridiculously slow. Like, you get the sense they're trying to show off the technology of, oh, look how smooth this looks or whatever, right? But
Yes.
it compromises the gameplay or whatever gameplay that there actually is. And this game is very minimal when it comes to like music or sound effects. And you would think it would add atmosphere, or at least that's what I think they're trying to do. But it just completely fails and it doesn't immerse me at all. Because what makes a horror game work is you need the proper atmosphere. You have to hook people in and then, keep them in, especially in an interactive segment where in an interactive video game where it's like you have to give the player the idea. In a horror game, anything can happen. Like anything could just like come up and get you. Right.
Mhm.
But in D, there isn't any of that. Like, except for that one enemy encounter, technically two enemy encounters, there's nothing there. So
they aren't even scary. That's the
yeah,
kicker.
and like, and the game's attempt at jump scares are so poorly done. Like you'll just see like random like skulls or just bones, just random bones, coming out of spikes or something. Like you open that one door that's almost kind of like the Iron Maiden, where it's like, the two like spikes. Like she opens it and sees them and does the whole thing, but like it's so poorly executed as a scene, it doesn't hit at all. It doesn't mean anything. So
Yeah,
it's like, this is such a lame attempt at being like establishing any sort of horror or suspense that it just kind of fails, honestly. It's like a horror experience in general,
Yeah.
It feels like a tech demo.
This is a game like I'll keep reiterating on it. This is a game that clearly was meant to be played in the year it came out, and nowadays just like we'll never be able to keep that same, like, if it even had any sort of impact. Well, I guess it did, because going into reception a little bit, this game was generally well received. To a degree, like some developers gave it like middling reviews. A lot of them gave it like higher, like 80s to around that range.
Yeah, so someone called this the best FMV game likely ever to be made, and that is just absolutely not true. Because even the FMV games at that time, the ones that were like live action stuff, even if those are like considerably worse as video games, they're 10 times more interesting because they'll have like the really bad cornball acting. Or even if you want to compare it to, say, the Phantasmagoria games, the sort of the famous, horror themed ones of those times, like those are more, games, and they have their more memorable moments in them.
I mean, there's text-based horror games that are more disturbing than this game is.
Yeah, I mean, and even Clock Tower. Like, I think Clock Tower handles the horror elements in that game very well. And that's a
Clock
fucking
Tower
Super Nintendo game.
Clock Tower on the Super Nintendo is a very effective horror game for what it is.
It works. Yeah, it works really fucking well. So it's like horror can be done well in the video game sphere in a pre-resi world, but this just doesn't do it, man. This is just like, I don't want to be mean to Kenji Eno, but he just, like, this feels like his first project. You know what I mean?
It sort of was. So going into Warp's history a little bit, the only other, so there was like a Mahjong game he released for 3DO. I might have to find that.
Oh, he did Tripped.
Tripped was the other major one, which is a puzzle game that I'm actually a little interested in trying out at some point because it actually looks pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I love me some puzzle games. I'm always down to play a puzzle game.
But D was his first major project, to the point where a lot of people don't even know Tripped exists. So
yeah, because I think this is what he was trying to go for doing something that's much more like a cinematic experience.
Yeah.
Which I commend him trying. I do, because it probably wasn't easy at the time, and it clearly wasn't. But
even
I haven't played the 2 quote unquote sequels, or at least the more successors, and in this idea that he's trying to present. I hope those 2 are better. I mean, I would like. I mean, I'd like to try both of them because I've heard those are actually more actual or games, so to speak. So there might be something more there. I don't know, but who knows?
I mean, even like modern, like retrospective reviews have found D to be very not as good as it was probably back in '95. It has a cult following status at most, but like to me, like I always laughed because like going into like internet reviewers, like one of the OGs that I really loved back in the day was Classic Game Room, and Classic Game Room had a second channel called CGR Undertow, and like Undertow, like I swear, like always it was basically whatever games Mark didn't want to cover, so he would just pawn it off on them.
Yeah, basically.
And I remember because the D was an Undertow review, and the reviewer was not very impressed with it at the time.
Oh yeah. What's interesting about Undertow is that they did so many reviews. I feel like if you type in any game from like the 360 era back into YouTube and just say review, there is like a 90% chance you will see an Undertow review of it.
Yeah, just unless it was a game that Mark wanted to talk about, in which case it'll be a regular Classic Game Room review.
Yeah. If you include Classic Game Room in there, but even then, like saying at the time, I mean, looking at these reviews at the time, I mean, yeah, some people were high on it, but I think even then they're just like, I don't know if this works. Like their criticisms are very similar to mine, which is just that there's no challenge at all. It is still super easy. I mean, maybe it was more effective as a horror experience back then, as you were saying. I'm not sure, but like,
it was kind of the first of what it was of its kind, and I think that kind of props it up a little bit. But at the same time, you can only like use that excuse so much before it kind of loses its meaning.
Yeah, like I compare this game to, I know you compared it to Myst. I compare it to, did you ever play The Seventh Guest?
I've dabbled with it. I haven't finished it or anything, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I've beaten The Seventh Guest. And The Seventh Guest, that's much closer to if Myst was a horror game. It's more closer to that. Like it has a bunch of different puzzles that kind of range in difficulty. And there's like some like live action, like kind of lore that you kind of like press together. There's some pre-rendered 3D stuff, and The Seventh Guest feels very, for 1993, like this is like the hot shit, right?
Yeah.
But when did I play and beat that? It might have been last year, and I was not impressed with it at all. I mean, the puzzles were fine. Some of the puzzles were pretty well done, but everything around it just did not age well. But Seventh Guest, I can kind of recognize for, at the time, it being something very special, like say a Myst. Even though I think Myst has aged better than you'd think, but they did fully remake it not that long ago. So it has so it's like you should just play that version because it's a lot cleaner to look at, but it's still the same Myst. And I believe that remake you can just walk around the world now. I know they added that in one of the later Myst ports, that they weren't pre-rendered backgrounds anymore. You could actually fully move around and explore, which definitely helps. And yeah, I can't remember the name of the. Is it just called Myst Remake? Probably what it's called.
Something like that. There's so many different versions of Myst.
Yeah, there's 5 fucking. They had 4 sequels, man.
Yep.
Yeah, there's Riven, Myst 3, Myst 4, Myst 5. Never played them. I remember, the dad of a girl I was dating a long time ago, he had a copy of, I think it was Myst 3. Was it? It was one of the Myst sequels for, I think it was for Xbox. And I remember
4.
Yeah, I think you're right. It must have been 4. And I remember looking at it, I'm thinking, they had sequels for Myst?
Mm-hmm.
And I found that like, what? But at the time I hadn't really played Myst. But I knew about it at the time.
We'll probably save Myst more because that is a 3DO game. We'll probably talk
Oh
about
yeah,
that at some point.
yeah. We can talk about Myst. Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna play the remake, but
Well, yeah.
I would like to talk about Myst because there's a lot to talk about, and it is very interesting. Oh, it got a VR remake a couple years ago.
Mm.
Ooh.
We can also talk about Pit. We can
I
talk
mean,
about
I'm not buying a fucking Oculus Quest just to play Myst. But I think the remake I'm thinking of, it's called Real Mist, I believe.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, that's probably the one to play, I would say. And it's on Good Old Games for $18 for that. Jesus.
Mm.
Hopefully it has a console port. Anyway, go ahead.
So going into what happened after, so obviously the 3DO, no secret, not very successful. This game kind of gets forgotten on the 3DO. Kenji Eno later has it ported to PlayStation and Saturn and published by Acclaim. And famously, Sony actually shorted the development, shorted the amount of copies they had manufactured on to focus on their own games, which realistically I don't really blame them. Kenji Eno, I guess, was so upset by this that he legit at a Sony event, no less, announced that all future games that he would develop would be exclusively on Sega consoles.
Man, that'll show them.
I'm sure it did. But that's why Enemy Zero is exclusively a Saturn game. Enemy Zero is the direct sequel to this game, and it is a very hard to find Saturn game.
Is it a direct sequel? I thought it was like its own thing.
Well, direct as in it's the second game in the trilogy. They're all standalone as far as story goes.
Because from what I remember, people have told me this game is basically like this is post Resident Evil coming out.
Yes.
And the influence is felt very much in this game. It being like Resi inspired. And I've heard some people say Enemy Zero is actually a bit of a gem and worth playing.
It's held up much better than D has.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Did it come out on 4 fucking discs?
Yes. It is a huge Saturn game.
Yeah. Fuck, man. I mean, it was that time. It was so weird when we hit CDs. You think like people are like, oh, we have all this like storage, but instead it just like games just ballooned from being like those like what 4 megabyte cartridges to like hundreds of megabytes just on like all these various discs. It's just crazy to me to think about. But I'm sure maybe one of our listeners will let us know if Enemy Zero is actually worth talking about or not. I know it's not a 3DO game, but I've always been curious to it. It's one. There's a similar one to Enemy Zero. It's like kind of a bigger Saturn game. Like has a bunch of discs, and I think it's also horror themed. I can't remember what it's called.
Maybe I'd have to look into that because the only other 4-discer I know of is Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Yeah, but that's not really a horror game.
No, it's not.
No, but I really want to play Saga one of these days.
And then, of course, the other game that would come out in the series would be D2 for the Dreamcast, and this one, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not gonna not make that joke.
I know, I gotcha. This one is actually more of a game. Like they've dropped the full motion video and actually tried to make it a game. That one has fans, but it's also completely unrelated. That one's another one that might be interesting to talk about at some point. Honestly,
yeah, it's Dreamcast only. I take it. Yeah.
Yes, it was originally supposed to be released for the Panasonic M2, which was the 3DO sequel that never happened.
Yeah. The few screenshots I've seen of D2, this is very like we're trying to do Resident Evil clones. Was Silent Hill out at this point?
I think it was just coming out because this was 99, so it was right. They were probably same year, around the same time.
When was Silent Hill 1? Was Silent Hill 1 99?
I believe it was.
Shit, I don't know why I thought it was earlier than that. Okay, it was February. It's February 99.
Yep. So.
Okay. Oh, the more you know.
Yeah, so it predates D2 by quite a bit.
Interesting.
Other than that, Kenji Ito's work is very unique, I'd say. Like, because another game that he did that I always like to mention, just because it's such a bizarre idea that's kind of interesting, is he made a game called Real Sound Cause No Regret, which is a entirely audio-based adventure sound novel game.
A adventure sound what?
So there's no graphics. It is 100% a sound game, but it's like an adventure game that uses sound. It only came out in Japan for the Saturn, and then it later saw a Dreamcast version. It is, so I actually have it imported. It is a very weird game that I feel like would be, it's a cooler idea if I knew what was going on with it. I think that's kind of the problem.
What, they didn't English translate this?
No, not at all. Cool idea though. Probably not cool enough to see. It's basically like an interactive radio drama. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, it means regret of wind or wind's regret. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
The wind rises.
That is a great movie.
A little too long though.
So yeah, I guess jumping into the end now. I played the Saturn version, so I can't really give my does it have a memory manager spiel this time? I have no idea. Probably not.
It doesn't even have a menu. Just
Yeah.
kind of starts.
Yeah, like most 3DO games.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like a VHS game.
A little. Only
But
you have a
there's
bit more
but there's no like
control.
laser gun you shoot at the TV, you know?
Yeah, it's no Action Max or anything.
Yeah, that shit was cool.
So I guess going to the end of it, I mean, it's going to be pretty obvious, but okay, let's play, stay, whatever it is. This is a stay away.
Stay away. God damn. If you're that curious, look up like a let's play online and watch it, and you'll probably fall asleep when you're watching it as well.
Probably.
Yeah, there's just nothing here, man. Like
This-
there's nothing even to make fun of. Like, not really. It's just it's giving me nothing to work with.
This game is literally like my perfect description of this game is aged, because there's nothing really salvageable from it anymore.
Yeah.
It's literally a piece of history at this point, and
Basically.
it probably should stay as a piece of history.
Yeah.
Like, I've played this game about 4 times now. I'm probably never going to play it again after this.
How in the hell have you played it 4 times? Once was more than enough for me.
I played it when I first got it. I emulated the 3DO version to see if it was any different. It wasn't. And I played the PlayStation version to see if that was any different, and it wasn't. And then I played it for this.
That's awful.
Yeah, it is not worth playing, even like out of morbid curiosity. Like,
No.
I don't even really get the cult classic status this game has, because there's not even a lot to say about it.
The only thing I could think is that because it's different, or maybe people at the time, like people who were there at the time, like really got hooked into it for what it was and have been trying to like sing this game's praises for almost 20 years, or over 20 years actually. And it's just, again, I don't know what people see in this, and it's not even a case of like it's a game that's super popular and everybody really loves it, but I'm just like, I don't get it. That's one thing. But this, it's like I kind of see why this has been lost to time. I mean, it would be interesting if, say, somebody was to take this game and try to remake it with like a more modern approach to it. Because I mean, you could take that framework of a story and this almost like framework of a game and maybe get something a bit more interesting out of it from like an indie horror perspective. But will that ever happen? Probably not.
Nah, I doubt it. I feel like,
because I imagine if somebody wanted to do that, they'd probably just make something original, which I think is what they should do anyway.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there are other games that use this style and have just been better games, honestly.
I mean, hell, like Amnesia,
Yeah.
in a way, is similar to this because Amnesia doesn't really have any that much gameplay as far as like attacking people. Um,
I mean,
it
even like
like that
Doki Doki Literature Club's a more effective horror game than this.
game was fucked up, man. But yeah, like that or Amnesia, Phasmophobia,
Mm.
like there's a lot more modern horror games that I think do a much better job at conveying horror, but through more unique ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, I
but game design has changed so much in like the 25 years since this game has come out that it's not surprising that so many games are much better at it. You know?
yeah. Like honestly, like I get the feeling the reason why this game won the poll was because it is the one that people probably know the least about.
I mean, it from the outside looking in, it was definitely like, what the hell is that? You know?
Like why is there a game called D? Like we have to know.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't feel like, they tortured us or anything. It didn't take that long to play.
No, like
It-
torture would be if this was like a 5-hour game or something.
Oh god damn it. No. Please, no. Yeah, that would be brutal, but yeah. I would rather play one of like the modern FNAF games than do that.
Yeah.
Though
I mean,
think
at least
though
those
I
have
think
lore at least.
well, and didn't the most recent one have gameplay? Like you can actually like move around now?
Yeah, it's still the
Finally?
same cheesy bullshit, but
Yeah, but they finally were like, okay, we have the technology to move you around. But to be fair, I think that's the game stopped being made by one guy.
yeah.
So
Also, the movie's coming out on Halloween, which I just found out was still in development. I thought that movie was done, but whatever.
I thought I got shit canned behind the scenes too, but
Me and Alex actually are curious to go see it, so
I'm surprised people still care about Scott Cawthon and the Five Nights at Freddy's thing. I'm surprised.
I don't think anyone cares about Scott in particular. Like,
Well,
I'm not going to get into the backstory there just because,
he did get I forget what it was that he like.
He didn't do anything like absolutely like cancelable. He just like did something that isn't really okay with public perception, and it's like he just kind of quietly went away. So
Oh yeah, that he basically it's just that he came out as a Republican, which online is going to give you backlash for obvious reasons, But yeah,
he was never like he was never aggressive about it though, so that's why I'm not really that upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, I could see why that would like upset some people on principle, but is that worth like doxing or like any of that kind of shit? Like, no, that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, it's a shame that happened, but I feel like I think he's still involved in the games, but as you said, he's much more of a backseat to everything.
Well, he was always a kind of quiet to himself kind of guy anyways. So.
Yeah, I think he's just like a family man. But
yeah.
But I feel like nowadays he's just like the series is in new hands and they just kind of handle it and he almost comes off as like a consultant or something.
He probably just like looks at it and gives his approval. That's probably about it.
Yeah. It must be weird being the guy who created this, where I'm sure our listeners remember back in, was it 2015 when those came out? And they caused quite the wave in the online sphere. But I think a game like that only got as popular as it did because of all like the YouTube Let's Players. Because like Twitch wasn't a big thing yet. Like I think it was around in 2015, but it wasn't like a big deal.
That and game theory and all the freaking lore shit. Because that game has way more lore than it needs.
I think it got overloaded with lore because of MatPat. Like overthinking it, and then Scott kind of leaning into it.
I think Scott was just trolling him the entire time, to be honest.
I hope so. And then, because I'm not the biggest MatPat fan, and then you have people
stuff.
And then you have like people like Markiplier, like because a game like this is perfect for like that YouTube Let's Play stuff. Perfect for it.
Yeah.
For like a Markiplier, a Jacksepticeye, a PewDiePie, right? It was perfect for them.
Yeah.
So and honestly, that's kind of how I experienced the games. Like I've played and beaten the first one out of curiosity. I actually played it, and it's exactly what you expect it to be.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's
they're like they're perfectly fine games. Like there's nothing like bad about them. They're just not my thing. Like that's just how I've always seen it.
Oh, I did play the RPG one. I forgot they made
Oh
a
yes, the
FNAF
NAF world.
RPG. And I remember it being very meh.
It's very jank.
Yeah.
Scott Cawthon's the final boss, and he self-deprecates himself the entire time.
Yeah, because I remember I played it because I was like, ooh, an RPG. And I watched it and I was just like, eh. Like I tried playing it and I'm like, this why am I playing this? Like I could play like any actual RPG that doesn't suck.
Yeah, it was just an experiment that went bad.
Yeah, and then there was the was it this? No, it wasn't special delivery. Oh, the Pizzeria Simulator. That one was interesting.
Yeah, there was
So
some. He had
the
some
business
cool
sim one.
ideas.
I thought the business sim one I thought was a good idea. But
I won't knock the guy for what he did because the guy made fucking billions probably off of that shit alone.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, did he expect it to turn into what it did? No.
No, it failed its Kickstarter.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I will look forward to the gaming and collecting episode where you and Alex talk about this movie because I assume you two are going to.
Alex wants to, so we will be seeing it at some point and talking about it.
Yeah, who they cast in this?
John
Hutcherson. I know that name. Elizabeth Lyle. It's like pale, but with an L instead of a P. Lyle. They got Matthew Lillard. Zoink Scoop. And it's really about it. I guess it's Scott. He's part of the screenplay like writer. Like he wrote the movie apparently.
Well, he had been working on it since it got announced. So
yeah, because that got announced like during the FNAF boom, which was essentially 1 through Sister Location. That was kind of like 2014 to about 2016 felt like the big boom.
Yeah.
For that series, and then once we hit like Pizza Simulator and Help Wanted and whatever, it kind of fell off super hard. So
pretty much, like I'm expecting a mediocre film, so I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised, but I'm not getting my hopes up.
I can't wait to hear people's opinion. Because am I gonna watch this? Probably not.
No,
I no interest.
So I guess talking about what we're gonna play next week, I mean, Alone in the Dark was number 2. Do you want to do Alone in the Dark next?
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, that's one of the most iconic horror games of all time. I think it's worth talking about at least.
Yeah, though I feel bad we might poo-poo it a little bit, or at least I mean poo-poo it a little bit.
Spoiler warning: I've already talked about this game on a different podcast, so
yeah. Well, I've never talked about it, so.
Oh, and that's why I'm looking forward to talking about it with different people because
you'll have a fresh take on my opinion of it.
Because I don't think Alone. Spoiler warning: I don't think Alone in the Dark's a great game, but I actually do praise it more than I will D. So we'll save that for the next episode.
That we will.
But yeah, once again, guys, thanks for joining us on the 3DO Experience. 3DO Experience can be found on all the major podcasting platforms. You can follow all of our links at linktree/TheBarberGames. And you can join us over on the GNC Podcast Discord server. You can talk 3DO, talk gaming, collecting, anime, all sorts of fun stuff. We're all nice there. But until next time, guys, we will see you all later.
Bye-bye.
If you're not playing on a 3DO system, what are you playing with?